Rolling.
We're back on the record at 4:02 p.m. Mr. Balwani, just to confirm we didn't have any substantive discussions during the break. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So before we took a break, we were talking about the Walgreens relationship, and I wanted to hand you a document. So I'm handing you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 206. Thanks. And you may not recognize the cover email, but do you recognize the presentation that begins at WAG-TH 6786?
Yeah, it looks like one of the Theranos presentations.
Do you recall making this presentation to Walgreens management?
I don't recall if this exact presentation, but we made a lot of presentations to Walgreens, so this could be one of them.
And does this look like a presentation Theranos put together?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Do you know who drafted presentations like these?
So when I came on board, there were already presentations in place from before I joined the company with data from pharmaceutical trials and a few other things the company had done in the past. And then when I joined, I think I took over making it nicer, because before that the presentation was not very good and we didn't have any PowerPoint specialists in the company, so unfortunately I became initially. But then I put the presentation in a common folder where the chemist would come and enter the chemistry data, and Elizabeth would come and add whatever data she had, and I would add more software data, so it became a collaborative kind of effort.
What was the name of the folder, the shared drive that was maintained?
I don't remember what it was in 2010, but later on, I think 2013, it became project management, commercial, something like that. It was kind of a vague name.
Under the project management?
Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong about the directory names, but I think there was a folder created for presentations.
I guess that leads to sort of an unrelated question. How did you maintain your files when you were at Theranos? Was there a system for saving documents that you used?
Yeah, we had we encouraged everybody to store everything on the network. So everyone's default home folder was on the network. So anytime you saved a document on your computer, you think you're saving locally in your home folder, but it's on the network. So that was the same for me, same for everybody. I also had access to my local drives. Most people didn't have access to local drives because back then we couldn't back them up because the software didn't exist. And over time we made it better. But still, because we wanted people to store everything on the network because it's easy to back up the network drive, I would say pretty much everything was on the network. Even my stuff over time was on the network.
And you could save it on the network and configure it in a way so that only you or
yes.
your other designated people could access it. Is that fair?
Yes, we had pretty tight controls, and over time they got even better. I brought the IT background, so I put the infrastructure in place so that people who had access will have access, people who don't have access don't have access.
Was your shared network, was the sort of drive that you kept documents on the network drive called the 300 folder?
Yeah, that was one folder I had created called 300, and I pretty much started, the initial intent of that was all of the planning and thinking and news articles, everything that was coming into my head, I was dumping in the folder, and I believe Elizabeth had access to 300, but I started using it as if it was my home folder, pretty much putting everything on 300.
Okay, and so the 300 would be the sort of head folder, and then you'd have subfolders.
Yes. Yeah.
And other than Ms. Holmes, did anyone else have access to the 300 folder?
The IT guys, but not anybody else.
Are you a big handwritten note taker? Did you maintain a lot of handwritten notes while you were at Theranos?
Not many. I'm actually not a big. I do a lot of notes on the whiteboard, but then I image them, and even when I'm thinking by myself, I think on whiteboards. And I had literally a glass wall length of this conference room in my office, and I would take notes, and then I would sit on my computer and try to type them in.
If you did happen to take notes on a pad, how would you keep those when you were at Theranos? If you did.
If I did, they will just be in my file somewhere. But I would say that didn't happen that often. I was not a good note taker.
Sorry for the digression there. I want
No
to
problem.
turn back to the presentation. So, in other words, at some point in time, PowerPoints like these became a collaborative process. Do you know back in the March 2010 period, sort of who would have the final authority to finalize a presentation like this?
I don't think there was, even until the day I left, there was anybody who had final authority, because people just add content, and the purpose of these was, it doesn't really matter, it doesn't have to be final, because we will go into the meeting and just kind of go through up and down, pick up the slide that we want to talk to, and jump to that slide, and then if there's something we didn't like, we'll just drag it to the end. So, and then we'll store that on the folder, and that became the latest version, and then somebody else will take that and kind of iterate that.
I guess when you're presenting to executives at Walgreens, who would make the decision about which slides to choose from that larger deck?
I don't think we did that. That's the point I'm making, is that if we had a large, our deck over time became 500 slides. So we didn't have to pick and choose slides. What we did was, even when we met with investors or board, we will just take the entire deck with us, virtually speaking. And we will just present it. In some cases, if I was meeting with a specific audience, which obviously you don't need to see other things, let's say I'm meeting with a physician, they don't need to see a hospital or insurance slides. I would put them at the bottom, or if the slide deck became too big, I'll just delete them, and then I'll store this. But then next time, if I want to work, I'll still go back to the mother source, the big slide deck. And so there was no one person making final decision. It was, here's the latest version, take it and show whatever slides you want to show.
I guess who would make the final decision about what slides to show Walgreens in this time period?
Well, specifically this one, if we presented this, then it'd be me and Elizabeth together.
If you take a look at the page ending in 6790,
Yes.
there's a few pictures here under the slide, overview of Theranos systems.
Yes.
Do you know who authored this slide?
Yeah, I think this existed before I joined the company. I may have made modifications to this. I may have added the database infrastructure, the software pieces I may have added. I don't remember, but, and obviously the iPhone icon, chances are I added that.
Is this sort of an accurate overview of the systems Theranos was planning on deploying at Walgreens in 2010? A system of devices, cartridges, and mobile applications supported by database infrastructure, algorithms, and applications?
There will be more components. This was not a fully inclusive deck. It was, like I said, most of the times we were using the slide deck as a conversation starter. So there may be things that are here that were not applicable to Walgreens. For example, the pattern recognition algorithms probably didn't have much use at Walgreens for foreseeable future, but we had them. And then in many cases, there were things that we would use for Walgreens that are not here. As we learned, we would add them.
In a slideshow like this, did you ever include a picture of a commercially available analyzer?
Well, we made a lot of presentations, so it really depends, but most of the times, no, we didn't. Or at least I didn't.
Why not?
You're not talking about modified commercial analyzers?
Just like a off the shelf used unmodified.
They were not interesting. We didn't go there and say, oh, by the way, we have an Abbott machine in our lab. Everybody will be like, so what? So nobody ever added that for that purpose. It was not interesting. Just like we didn't have pictures of pipettes. We didn't have pipettes in our labs, and a lot of other equipment in the lab. Not interesting.
At this time, Theranos hadn't invented its nanotainer CTN, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We did have a small capillary tube that I mentioned earlier that we used to use to wick the blood off the finger, but it was not a nanotainer.
If you turn to the page ending in 6792, there's a slide on validation of Theranos systems.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sorry.
Do you recall who wrote this slide?
These are not my words because I did not have this background, so chances are I didn't do it. But I don't know who actually did. I wouldn't be able to tell.
In 2010, I guess, do you know how Theranos systems had been validated under FDA or ICH guidelines? My
understanding, again, this is, I'm not a chemist. A lot of these things that are here are about chemistry. So my understanding was that our chemistry assays that we were developing for pharmaceutical companies followed a certain protocol, which was dictated by these 21 CFR compliant and ICH guidelines. It says we follow the guidelines. So that was my understanding. But if you ask me to explain this stuff, I won't be able to. I don't know what they are.
If you turn to the page ending 6814.
By the way, would Elizabeth Holmes have known what that was talking about, the validation slide?
I mean, back then, she would have known more than I did because she was with the company longer at that point. This is still me in the company, 6 months in the company. So at that time, she would know more. I don't know if she still remembers all this stuff or not.
Okay. And when you were sending out, presentation material to, third parties, potential business partners like Walgreens, for instance, in this instance, would you raise questions if you didn't understand what was on a slide that was being sent to them?
Not me. I mean, I would, most of the times what we were sharing, at least at this time, going back to 2010, was we are a small company, this is what we have done in the past. It was more like that, not necessarily this is what we have done and this is what we're going to do with Walgreens when we launch with you. It was more introducing our company and our capabilities, our experiences, was what we were trying to get across. And in some cases, our vision, sorry. But no, I would, if I didn't understand something, I would not pull the chain saying, I don't know what this is. Somebody explained this to me. I would, like I said, this was a very complicated structure. I know a lot more now than I did in 2010, which is why I think I can address a lot more. But back then, I knew even less. And so I would not pull the chain just because I didn't understand.
Why wouldn't you ask the question?
Because I knew this is a very complicated business. Just because I don't understand something doesn't mean it's not right or this was not done. There are other people in the company, the team leads, the chemists, the head chemists, the R&D guys who had a lot more knowledge than I did, so I assume they must have looked at it.
So turning to the page ending in 6814. Slide called Launch of Theranos Systems at Walgreens. Do you see that?
I do.
It says Theranos would like to cement a partnership with Walgreens by end of April 2010 to launch the general chemistry, influenza, and fertility tests in Q4 2010. Was that your understanding of the company's goal at the time?
Actually, give me 1 sec so I can review this if you don't mind.
Of course.
I mean, that was one of the ideas that we had discussed with Walgreens.
Was Theranos' TSPU capable of performing the general chemistry, influenza, and fertility tests?
The influenza and fertility test, we actually had some assays in validation stages. So H1N1 was an influenza test. I talked about H1N1 earlier. So that we were capable of. I don't know which general chemistry tests we had in mind, so I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so in other words, Theranos didn't have all of its general chemistry tests available on its TSPU in 2010?
I don't think we are saying that here either, that we are launching all general chemistry. General chemistry has hundreds, if not thousands, of tests.
I guess earlier we talked about the fact that the 3.0 and the 3.5 could generally only run immunoassay or ELISA tests.
Yes, correct.
Are those a subset of general chemistry tests?
No, general chemistry, actually, again, I'm out of my league here, but my understanding of general chemistry is there are some tests that you can, there's some overlap between general chemistry and immunoassays that we can do on general chemistry machines like ADVI 1800s. So there is some overlap, so I don't know what we had in mind here. Oh, sorry. Yes.
So I mean, I guess I hear your point that you're not saying that you're going to run all general chemistry tests at this time, but just as a factual matter, Theranos couldn't run all general chemistry tests on its TSPU in April 2010.
I don't think we could run all general chemistry tests. I don't know if we could run some. I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that the other thing also is I don't know if what we meant then was launch of general chemistry influenza and fertility test, or did we really mean general chemistry as in the category general chemistry? So I don't know, I don't want to guess on that one. But we were talking about panels at that point, and my understanding is influenza and fertility panels we could have done.
If you go to 6801, you'll see there that there's a list of general chemistry tests on that slide.
Yes.
Could the TSPU conduct testing on all of these tests?
Not at that time. And actually, one more point. Here, the general chemistry actually is being used as in routine chemistry. Because if you look the first column, it says CBC, complete blood count. That's not a GC test. That's not a general chemistry test. It's a hematology test. So, and thyroid panel is all immunoassays. So all of the assays here, TSH, T3, T4. Yes. All the thyroid panel listed here are immunoassays. So which is what I was commenting earlier, that I don't know if we meant general chemistry in the other slide as in the category general chemistry, or general chemistry as in routine chemistry. So here, now this slide answers that question that we were talking about. What are the routine chemistry? General chemistry is not the right technical name to use here.
Could the TSPU do testing for the complete blood count?
Not at that time.
What about the complete metabolic panel?
Not at that time. We were obviously working on the revisions to 3.0, and we thought at that point that we will be able to, we would put, if we had pursued this path, we would have put, I think I mentioned earlier that we were going to modify 3.0 and add general chemistry to 3.5. And we were working on the R&D phases at that time. Even in March and April 2013, we didn't pursue that because we didn't pursue this path with Walgreens.
Okay, doesn't the slide make it look like Theranos was able to conduct that testing already at the time this was presented in March 2010?
No, I don't read it this way. Like I said, a lot of the slides here, if you read them, I mean, for example, there was a slide that I saw. Go to page number 6812 that has individualized health assistant application. Picture of iPhone and BlackBerry and automated health support. We didn't have any of that stuff. And Walgreens understood that, because if we had it, we would have shown it to them. The software is easy to demonstrate. And when we talked about this, we said this is our vision, that when a patient comes in, we will be able to do the test. You can even, for example, the quote here, don't forget workout clothes when you travel to Boston. We couldn't do any of that stuff. The purpose of a lot of these slides was to show our vision of what we want to see happen. And none of this was there, and it didn't happen even until I left. But again, this was a slide we used to start a conversation. So it's the same thing there, is that if we could have done all those tests, then we wouldn't be saying, let's launch with those two panels. Is why wouldn't we launch with everything? But it was a conversation starter that we have learned that these are the panels that are most commonly ordered. And we were correct about that. That this is what we should focus on as a company, as a partnership, as an offering.
Did Theranos enter into a contract with Walgreens in 2010?
Yes, we did.
I mean, I don't want to go through kind of each of the contract terms, but what was your general understanding of what the agreement was between the companies at that time?
That we will work together in deploying Theranos services at Walgreens locations. That we would put a TSPU at Walgreens locations, perform some tests there that we could from fingerstick, and we will build all the software on the back end that we had to build in order to make consumer-facing portal web apps available. We had to build out the CLIA lab. Obviously, the CLIA lab didn't exist at that time because we couldn't launch this without the CLIA lab. CLIA lab was a prerequisite because all of these assays we were going to run would have been LDTs, or lab developed tests, which have to be validated by CLIA lab. So all of that work didn't exist. Walgreens knew we didn't have a CLIA lab because CLIA lab license was publicly available information, and we didn't have it. So the contract was signed so that now we could start at that direction. And we pivoted and we started focusing all of our R&D efforts from that point onwards to prepare for that. Now, we spent a lot of time in the contract negotiating, and one of the things that I spent a lot of time on was not to make any commitments around timeline on when we are going to launch, because we had to build a ton of infrastructure. And Walgreens too, but we had to do a lot of heavy lifting. And I made sure that we did not don't bind ourselves to any launch date, and there's none in their contract.
And as part of that, entering that contract, did Walgreens make any payments to Theranos?
I don't think they made the payment at that time. I think they made one payment over time. Once we met a certain milestone, I forgot what it was, but it was, I think they made the first payment end of 2012.
And so you mentioned that kind of that initial contract, you didn't want to be bound in time-wise.
Actually, sorry, I just remembered to correct myself. They for sure didn't make a commitment. It was only when we modified the contract in 2012, after that we had asked for the first payment.
And so you sort of read my mind. How did the contract get amended in 2012?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, our initial thoughts were, and keep in mind this is 2010, April, we are still about 50 or 60 people in the company. Walgreens had come and visited us. They had seen our entire company. We have walked them through our entire building, including the shipping and handling dock. So they literally saw everything. And after that, we started hashing out the details of how things will work out. Obviously, we had to open the CLIA lab, validate the assays as LDTs, put the devices in the Walgreens stores, and then we engaged counsel to make sure everything we are doing perfectly complies with regulations. And we had advice from our counsel that what our plan of action was complies. Walgreens had hired consultants who told them it does, but it's a risky proposition. It may be that some components of this FDA may not like. And so we started exchanging and starting having a dialogue with the Walgreens. In the meantime, obviously, our entire company was focused on working in this direction that we had chosen. And around, I think, 2011-ish is when we realized that Walgreens didn't want to bear that risk because they were a big company. They were also in the media. They were in hot water because they had done something with another company in 2010 or 2011 where they started distributing something that was not FDA cleared, nothing related to us. It was some other third company, and FDA had sent them a warning letter either to them or to the company whose products the Walgreens was distributing. So Walgreens was gun shy at that time, and they said, we don't want to be in the media again, we don't want to take any risks. So things kind of slowed down, but we pursued this path of TSPUs and capabilities. And I think in 2012, I don't remember which month, we started exploring the possibility, what if we are running everything in our lab, then there's only one CLIA lab, and we just ship samples from the field. And we started prototyping nanotainers and CTNs and put a ton of effort in there. Pretty much, I think I would say majority of our company, or a large chunk of our company, was working on CTN because it was a very monumental undertaking. There are companies out there who do nothing but make these vacutainers or vessels for transferring blood. This is the entire business, multi-billion-dollar companies. And for us, obviously, this was a big project. It had to be done right. So we started focusing on CTNs, and once we got to the point where we thought it was a good solution, good path forward, we approached Walgreens again saying, what do you think about this? Or maybe it was Walgreens who came up with that idea and we did the R&D around it. And then we met together and we said, this seems like a good path. Obviously shifted a lot of what we were doing from focusing on TSPUs and all of our R&D over there. Again, we are still a small company. This is 2012, so maybe we are, I don't know, 100 people or so. And now we started running after the CTN, the centralized lab model, and that's how it came about.
And so
sorry for the long answer.
No, it saves me from asking more obvious questions. But how is the contract with Walgreens amended in 2012?
And if you're asking specific contract language, I mean, obviously you have the contract.
No, sure. I'm just trying to get just directionally in terms of the business strategy of the company and its relationship with Walgreens. Why did Theranos amend the contract in 2012?
Well, when we had this discussion, Walgreens loved the idea.
This idea of shipping
samples.
Yeah, okay.
The reason is this required even lesser investment by Walgreens because they didn't have to build out space for our TSPUs and power and HVAC and all that stuff. And more importantly, this allowed us to expand faster because we were no longer bound by necessarily by production capacity of TSPUs and cartridges and training people on how to use the machines and so on and so forth. So they loved that idea. I mean, obviously their goal was from this whole project was get more people in the store so they can buy more stuff. You know, more volume, more dollars per transaction. And this was also the time where we started talking to Walgreens about the threat from Amazon and other tech companies to their core business. They knew that retail business is going to change significantly, and as obviously now we are seeing it, but we started discussing with them, and they knew that if people start getting pharmacies at home delivered by Amazon, and I thought it was an inevitable thing, it's going to happen, just a matter of time, but they were tuned to that, and people stop coming to the store to buy, you know, liquor and tobacco and other things. Then how would they attract people? But if they had a service in the store that kind of forces you to be in the store, like fingerstick, you cannot do remotely, at least for foreseeable future, that this will be a really great business for them because they could continue to bring patients in. And the CTN, the shipping samples, basically means we can grow faster. And that was their main motivation. So this is how it came about.
Okay, and in your mind, I guess, what did the 2012 amendment accomplish to achieve those business ends?
From what I remember, obviously I would love to see the language, but what I remember was that we modified it so that we said we are shifting to a centralized lab model as quote-unquote phase 1. And I called it Normandy, as I earlier said, and phase 2, which was going to be put the device on site. I thought D-Day was a good name, but boring minds took over and called it phase 1 and phase 2. So the contract was, let's go full force phase 1, central lab model, ship samples to the centralized lab, and I'm sure there were a few other things, details that we may have changed there.
Did the 2012 amendment, in your mind, change any commitments in terms of, you mentioned timeline being something that was important to you in the original contract?
Yeah, I don't recall that we still bound ourselves to any specific timeline, but I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure if there were one, Walgreens would have been calling me every day. So my guess is we didn't commit to his timeline. The other thing that's important also is we also, in either contracts, and second one, didn't commit to any certain percentage of finger sticks in the contract either. So we didn't commit to those two things, significant things. Please, go ahead.
Why was that important to you?
Well, we wanted to have control over our business. You know, if a doctor said to us, I'm going to send you my patients, I love everything else about you, I love the fact that you're cheap, you're transparent, your service is great, you're convenient, you're open weekends, you're open late nights, my patients love coming to you, I love that bamboo tree and the TV screen, but fingerstick is new and healthcare changes very slowly, sometimes a decade, you know, for them to just change simple things. We wanted to make sure that we don't lose the business. If doctor loves everything else about us, we don't want to, and I explained this example that I just gave you is an example that I used with a lot of people, a lot of investors, and certainly with Walgreens, and they all understood that, yeah, what they care about is more people coming into Walgreens. It was the most important thing.
And I guess at what point in time did Theranos decide that it was sort of ready to roll out that offering in the in-store and pursue that launch, like we talked about, that soft launch followed by the opening of additional stores?
It wasn't necessarily one moment when we said that today's the day we are ready for launch. It's an incremental progress. You know, what we were doing was a fairly, like I said, complicated Rubik's Cube kind of scenario, where you have how many assays on CLIA lab, how many are validated, how many are fingerstick, how many are from serum, how many are from plasma, how many venipunctures, are the people trained in the field, are the stores built out, how many people do you have in the CLIA lab, the ability to pick up samples. So there were a ton of moving pieces. Even if there was a deadline saying, okay, now we are ready for 5 stores, there was no way to be able to measure that we are ready for 5 stores. You know, you could only say, I think we are ready to process, you know, 100 samples a day or 50 samples a day. Let's start. And then as we learn We will add more capabilities. We will obviously recruit. One of the things we wanted to do was get out so we can tell people what we were doing, so that could help with recruiting, which it did. So there was no one big bang moment. There was more, okay, we need to launch, so we get out, and then we learn and iterate and make products, make our service better. Not necessarily any specific product, but service.
I'll hand you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 60. Do you recognize Exhibit 63?
I do.
What is it?
This is a contract amendment that we had signed on December 31st, 2013 with Walgreens to our master purchase agreement.
And if you look on the page ending in 102, or page 4 of the amendment,
Yes.
there's a section entitled Innovation Fee.
Yes.
The third sentence in says, to that end, and subject to section 7 below, the parties have agreed that Walgreens shall accelerate payment of the innovation fee so that 75M of the pre-purchase will become immediately due.
Yes.
Why did Theranos pursue this contract provision?
Why did we pursue the acceleration of innovation fee?
Correct.
There were a lot of things that we were doing for Walgreens that we thought we were delivering on, and for example, exclusivity. And Walgreens had called us in December. They saw things were moving slow, and they would have lost the exclusivity. I think the original contract anticipated 12 months national exclusivity. I'm not sure, it's in the clause. And we had already launched in September and November in Arizona. So they thought the clock on exclusivity was ticking, and they would lose it in 12 months or so. And they didn't want us to go to CVS. They absolutely wanted to make sure this service and all of the features that we were building, software, all of the stuff, stays Walgreens only. And they didn't want, and they knew that at some point when the exclusivity expires, and that was the whole intent, that we are free to work with anybody else. So they wanted to tie us to exclusivity more, and we said, in order to do that, you have to make a deeper commitment, which is where this came from.
And what was your understanding of, in 2013, of how Theranos would earn the innovation fee payment?
Well, there were, there's some language in the contract I obviously don't remember, but this was meant as a non-refundable payment to us. The 100 million, they had already paid $25 million before, which is clearly marked as non-refundable in the contract. And then this $75 million in the contract, if you read the language, was also non-refundable as an innovation fee payment. So kind of that was my understanding at that point, that this is what it is.
So what you're saying is at the end of 2013, when this was signed, you'd understood that the innovation fee was sort of entirely Theranos's and not refundable to Walgreens?
There were some minor clause. I don't remember the language again in the contract. I will have to see it. But there were some edge cases in which it could have triggered returning bits and pieces of it. However, if I remember correctly, Theranos had the right to cancel the contract and not have to return this money. There was no provision for returning this money if we canceled the contract. So we had come up with a lot of language to lock this thing down in an ironclad way. So it's non-refundable because what we were providing them at that point was exclusivity over CVS and other retailers, and some other guarantees that we gave them, best price guarantee during that time period, the first announcements, right? There were a bunch of other soft things that we had given them. So the idea was, yes, my understanding at that time was that this is $100 million non-refundable. For most part, yeah.
And did the $100 million, other than exclusivity, obligate Theranos in any way in your mind at the end of 2013? I mean, did Theranos obligate itself to provide services for Walgreens?
Well, I
part
think
of that fee?
there is language here that talks about that we cannot work with CVS. We had to work with Walgreens. If we wanted to work with anybody else, and we were going to launch, let's say, in certain state, we had to go to Walgreens first and tell them we are launching in XYZ states, and only if they said no in 30 days or 60 days or something like that, only then we could launch with others. And there were at least 3 states, I remember, New York, California, Arizona, where effectively we couldn't work with others, with CVS particularly, which was their main focus. So, so I don't know if I answered your question or not, but the point is that we didn't necessarily have to launch at a certain cadence with them, if this is what you're asking, or provide services to them, but we couldn't anywhere else with anybody else either.
I guess did you have to provide any sort of services to Walgreens as part of this $100 million fee? Is my question.
Well, I think I answered that. By services is, if you're talking about lab services specifically, the answer is I don't remember in the contract if there was any specific language that we have to provide lab services. It was a payment. This is why it was called innovation payment. It was a payment for us providing services at Walgreens, plus a lot of these soft assets that we provided to them, like exclusivity over CVS, which was the main trigger for this amendment. They wanted to make sure they lock us down.
Did you understand that that part of the innovation fee could be convertible to equity at any point in time?
There was a very narrow window that they had, that if they had wanted to convert, which they didn't. So I think there was some part of that technically could have been converted into equity, but I don't think they pulled the trigger on that. That didn't happen. So, and it's right here, I think.
Sorry, what are you looking at?
Page number 103, ending in 103, page number 5 of the contract.
Okay, and is that section 7?
Yes, additional equity rights. The parties agree that 50 million of 75 made by Walgreens may be converted at Walgreens' option into equity on such terms as are made available to investors in Theranos planned equity financing in the first quarter of 2014. And they didn't do that.
Okay, and the next sentence says the parties also agree that upon signing this agreement, Walgreens will receive an option to purchase up to $50 million in Theranos equity on terms made available to investors who invested in the prior equity financing. You didn't view that as part of the innovation fee?
No, not at all. Absolutely. That was separate. If they wanted more equity, they had to give more cash.
And what?
And let me tell you why. The reason is we were absolutely focused on the fact that we had already provided them great service, which is our exclusivity, not working with anybody else, focusing our entire company on Walgreens. So, yeah, absolutely.
I guess in your view, did this $50 million option to purchase additional equity, did it similarly have a time limitation of the first quarter of 2014?
You know, I think the language seems to be not clear about that, but I don't know the answer to that. Had they come back and they said, no, we want 50 million equity and there's no time limit on this one, you know, we would have dealt with that at that point. But in general, we were not eager to have Walgreens equity, give equity in general.
Why not?
Well, they were our distributor, and we knew the animosity between them and CVS and others. So giving equity to one basically meant the other will just not, it will be very difficult partner to work with. Even if you give them better terms, the fact that the other guy may make a dime from their partnership with us was a major issue for a retailer. I mean, this is a pretty brutal competition.
It sounds like it may be getting a little hoarse. Why don't we go off the record briefly at 441?
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, it's 4:41. We are going off the record. Rolling.
Back on the record at 4:51, Mr. Balwani, we didn't have any substantive discussions during the break, is that correct?
That's correct.
So, Mr. Balwani, is it your testimony today then that at the time that Walgreens and Theranos signed Exhibit 63 in December of 2013, that the $75 million innovation payment, adding to that the $25 million that had already been paid, that was Theranos' to keep and was not returnable to Walgreens?
Like I said, there were some clauses in the contract that I don't remember that could have triggered returning some of that money, but I don't remember what those clauses were, but for most part, my understanding is that, yes, that money was non-refundable.
Okay, and what portion do you recall may have been refundable to Walgreens?
I think it was not quantitatively defined, is my recollection. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what the quantitative number was, but it could have been 0 or it could have been more.
And there's obviously a contract if you want to go over
Yeah.
the specific terms.
Right. And so, and earlier in your testimony before the break, you mentioned that the $75 million payment was being accelerated in exchange for greater exclusivity rights for Walgreens. Do you remember that testimony?
That was one of the things. There were other things here that we also had committed to as part of that. One was, if you look on page number 1, which is page number 0099, ending in 0099, it was that second paragraph, first line. It is intentional of the parties to develop a mutually beneficial strategic relationship that facilitates the successful deployment of Theranos nationally, establishes Walgreens as the national partner for Theranos. So we were doing okay? Yeah, I was cautious. We were making a commitment to Walgreens on that front also, that we were national partner with them. And they obviously, as you can see here, that they are making a commitment that they are our national partner.
Okay, and these exclusivity rights that had been negotiated, at what point or how long would Theranos have to perform under those rights and give, you know, Walgreens exclusivity before Walgreens would be satisfied that Theranos had upheld its share of the bargain?
Yes, I think there are details here on page number 2, which is page number marked 0100. There's an exclusivity section here that talks about when and how long the exclusivity will last on market by market basis, and also names over who. So Walgreens is willing to commit to a higher level of build-out. You guys see it?
Where are you pointing to?
Page number 2, the exclusivity paragraph.
Okay.
Oh,
Yes, I see that.
Yeah. With respect to stores in order to provide service to Theranos, the party's expectation is the majority of Theranos spaces will be gold or silver spaces, with no more than 20% bronze spaces and minimum 40% gold spaces. As such, the parties agree that increased exclusivity represents a fair market value exchange for such commitment, while the parties acknowledge the need to further document, and then goes on in the next paragraph. It talks about on the 4th line of that paragraph, that with respect to California, Arizona, and New York, the parties agree to the following exclusivity framework. For each state listed above, a period of 18 months commencing on the date on which 20th Walgreens stores or other number the parties may agree located such state are actively collecting samples for commercial patients. Theranos shall not provide testing services or samples collected on its behalf through any of the following: Walmart, CVS, Rite Aid, Target. And there are a couple of other things here. And then also I think there's another section that says exclusivity will last for 18 months and then automatically renews for 12 months if Walgreens has fulfilled its commitment. And then the next paragraph, do you want me to continue?
Oh, I was going to ask you, so it sounds like there was some period of time that was set in the contract for which Theranos needed to give exclusivity to Walgreens and not work with other retail pharmacy partners. Is that right?
The net effect was going to be that, yes.
Okay, it was something at least 18 months, and there were some renewal provisions if
Yes.
all went well.
And there were some exclusions for, I think, Safeway, and then ultimately for Walmart also.
Okay, so why would it be appropriate then to think that Theranos could keep the $75 million payment if Theranos still had to perform on its exclusivity obligations?
I'm not sure if I understood the question.
If Theranos still had to ensure that it was being exclusive to
Right.
Walgreens and not work with other partners,
Right.
why was it appropriate for Theranos to believe that it could keep the $75 million? If Theranos walked away and went with CVS,
Right.
wouldn't Theranos have to return the money to Walgreens?
And if the contract says so, which the contract doesn't say that.
Okay, so what would be Walgreens' remedy then if that happened?
I will have to look at the contract. There's a whole remedy section under contracts. If this happens and that happens, then what happens? But I know there's a remedy section in the contract.
Okay, but it's your understanding that the $75 million would not be returnable to Walgreens? That would not be a remedy that they could get back?
Again, I don't know the language, but my understanding at that point was that the language, the way it was written, was because the thing is, we didn't have to necessarily give them exclusivity all the way through 36 months, for instance, just picking a number, for us to have earned that money, because the clock had already started ticking. We had already delivered on our exclusivity commitment to Walgreens long before we started, and long before we signed this contract. So exclusivity commitment, now from an accounting perspective, if the accountants said, GAAP says you can only recognize it by month, I'm not an accountant. That was not my forte, and how do you recognize that on the books? But my understanding was that the way we had structured the contract was, and we had long discussions about that. This was not something that they forgot. We had long discussions that, look, we are doing all these things for you. We will continue to do this for you, but this $100 million is not coming back to you, except for those couple of clauses that we had talked about. If we didn't succeed, I think, or we didn't deliver on some things, then it may not come to you. And that's the language is there in the contract. But we had very clear discussions about this. $100 million was ours. Now, the reason also, there's a reason why the innovation payment was called innovation payment, because Walgreens didn't want to just be, say, here's $100 million, and then some of the lawyers, I think, were ultra conservative, told them Medicare may think of that as a kickback, that Theranos is performing services in your location, and now because of that you are getting patients. So referring Medicare patients between two healthcare providers is, I think there are laws against this. Again, I'm speaking out of my league here, but it was even this term was used intentionally to make sure that, hey, this is not anything like that. This is actually a innovation payment in exchange for all these things that you're providing us.
And it was also your understanding that if Theranos decided not to go out and roll out with Walgreens, that also Walgreens wouldn't be able to get back that $75 million payment?
The way we read the contract, at least at this point, because we were delivering to Walgreens, my understanding was, yes, we had already done the heavy lifting. Contract was already signed in 2012, amendment, and at this point, we have mostly delivered and will continue to deliver. But if Walgreens changes mind and stop rolling out with us, and we had to go work with CVS, the money is not refundable to you. Absolutely, that was my understanding.
But what if Theranos changed his mind and decided, well, it wasn't worth it to keep working with Walgreens in say January 2014?
But we were stuck. We couldn't just work with anybody else.
Right. So I'm saying, if Theranos just decided it's not worth it, the Walgreens relationship isn't worth it, we're not going to stick to this exclusivity provision, we're going to go contract with, Rite Aid or something like that.
Well, you're talking about what happens if you breach the contract.
Right.
Well, I don't know. Again, I'm not a lawyer. That would be out of my league to say what happens when you breach the contract. Obviously, when you sign a contract, at least my understanding of this was, you don't anticipate breaching the contract when you're signing the contract. There's remedy provisions there, and I think my understanding was the worst that will happen is if we don't work with them, we can't work with anybody else either. At least CVS, which would have been still a good outcome for Walgreens, that as long as we didn't work with CVS. This is why the whole thing was structured this way.
I just want to say for the record, and maybe this is coming, but we're talking about specific terms of a contract as to whether something's going to be refundable or not refundable, and the contract exists, we could look at it, we don't need to have speculation about whether it's refundable or not. We can look at it with reference to the specific language. So that seems to me a better way, but obviously you control the record at your examination, so go ahead. But I just want to make sure our position's clear that we could go to the contract and then look at the chapter and verse to make sure we're all clear on what it says and what it doesn't say.
Sure. I don't want to get into a long discussion about contract interpretation here. I'm just trying to get a sense of what your understanding of the contract said and what it meant to you at the time.
Yeah, that was my understanding. But again, having said that, I'll also add that I'm speaking from memory. I'm sure there are specifics there that if I see may refresh my memory and things, I may be misremembering things.
Did Theranos seek the acceleration of the innovation fee because it was running out of money at the end of 2013?
No, that was not the key reason. We would have, raised the money, or we would have money. I mean, plus I was there. I would have, just like I bridged the loan to the company before, I could have done that.
What were Theranos' discussions around its cash position at the end of 2013?
Well, at this point, we wanted to broaden our partnerships. We wanted to start thinking about working with CVS and others, and Walgreens knew that was always top of our mind, that we didn't want to be just exclusive with Walgreens. And so a lot of this was done by then. In just a month before, or actually even a couple of weeks before we started negotiating this amendment, the Walgreens CEO and their executive team had invited Elizabeth Holmes and myself to a dinner, executive dinner in Arizona. And I think it was November, but I may be off by a few months. It was cold, but it was November. And in the executive meeting, we were the guests of honor, and his CEO and his entire direct reports were there. Most of them were there. And he went around the table and he asked pointedly every single person, tell me how you're going to make sure that Theranos is going to be the most successful project that we have done in the company, or something like that. So these guys were already thinking that we need to make sure that we own this thing and we run with it and we accelerate this thing. They requested that meeting. We didn't go there. We didn't ask for that. So it was their work that brought about these discussions. That triggered it. And they wanted to make sure we get locked down with Walgreens and not work with anybody else.
So you're saying that they proposed accelerating the payment of the innovation fee?
No, they proposed, Walgreens is not going to accelerate payment to you. They proposed the amendment. They proposed increased exclusivity. We were complaining about building out stores because we were not specific enough on what the store is going to look like, and they saw how our Palo Alto store looked like, and this is kind of what we wanted everywhere. So they said, yeah, we will do it, but they found an opportunity to lock us down further, and they said, well, we want more exclusivity. We especially want to make sure you don't work with CVS. So that triggered it.
So once you had this amendment in place and you're working on the Walgreens rollout, on the Theranos team, sort of who led the oversight of the Walgreens project?
I was involved quite a bit, especially through 2014, and I think over time my involvement with the rollout of the project decreased. I had hired a general manager in Arizona, and we built a team under her who was an operations person. And she was basically making sure that trains are running on time, the phlebotomists are being managed, the couriers are picking up the samples. We also had a lab in Arizona at one point, and she was also managing the administration side of the lab also.
And I guess who are your primary points of contact on the Walgreens side at the sort of late 2013 or late 2014 time period? There was no one person. It was a broad team. It was one of my primary contacts. There was another person. His name was. I forgot his title. He was at that time, and he was put in charge of this project from Walgreens side. So he became my point of contact. He had another person reporting into him. He also got in touch with me around the operational details, but he was also engaging with my team in Arizona. But he was an ops guy, operations stuff. So he was, a close associate. I used to talk to him. And there was another guy they brought in, I forgot the title. So I would talk to him, we would be on the calls often. So there were quite a few people who were my point of contact. And obviously we were close, and we loved working with him. And so we were pretty close like family with these guys at that time. And I guess is it fair to say that Walgreens and Theranos in this time period were in pretty constant communication about the specifics of the rollout in Arizona?
I don't know about constant communication about every aspect, because there are a lot of things, there are a ton of details. I mean, this was our entire business. So chances are not everything, but to the extent possible, people were talking, operation level, and I was talking to the executives quite often, yes.
And I guess what did you understand, what metrics were important to Walgreens from your perspective?
Number of people coming to the store. The more people come, the more Walgreens makes money. So certainly more people coming to the store, and obviously, excuse me, the quality of service was important to both of us because Walgreens technicians were interfacing with the patients. They were checking them in. And in 2014, under the current model, this contract, Walgreens technicians were also performing finger sticks. We had spent a lot of time training them. We had created training curriculums. So that was one of the things we were following also, that what percentage of customers we are performing finger stick on, and then the turnaround time of patient samples. So there were a few matrices related to the service being performed in the store.
And was the percentage of blood draws that were taken on finger stick versus venous important to Walgreens from your perspective at this time?
In 2013-14, yes, it was important. We used to talk about that, so I assumed it was important.
And you described the number of people coming into the stores. Was that commonly referred to as patients per day or patients per month?
Yes.
I guess, would patients be?
They were all terms we used, but yes, we used to call them patients, but at some point, I think we changed the terminology. We said we should call them guests, like Target does. That's a better name than patient. I mean, they may not be sick, so why call them patients? So then we changed it to guests, but unfortunately, the old patients per day kind of stuck, and at least in the software side of the world, once you code something, we actually were calling patients in the code, so it stuck for a while.
I'm going to hand you another document that's been marked as Exhibit 173. Do you recognize Exhibit 173?
I don't recall it, but it seems like a Walgreens deck.
Does the format look like PowerPoint decks that you would receive from Walgreens from time to time?
Yeah, it looks like a deck prepared by Walgreens, yes.
And what was the purpose of these decks?
It was different, I think, most of the times, but this one has a title saying Executive Steering Committee Meeting, so I guess this was a presentation that some people at Walgreens, and I didn't notice the name, were making to somebody else in Walgreens.
I guess, what was the Executive Steering Committee?
You know, I didn't understand Walgreens naming conventions. I think it was people who were responsible for managing a project or steering a project to success. But
if you turn to the page ending 48212.
yes,
there's sort of a type of org chart that describes the Executive Steering Committee, Operating Committee, and then some other information below that.
yes.
Do you see that?
I do.
And do you see that you're listed as a member of the Executive Steering Committee?
I do.
Did you understand that you were part of sort of the steering committee?
No, I don't. This was very nice of Walgreens to put my name in there, and I may have attended a meeting. I actually don't even remember attending a steering committee meeting because I don't recognize some of these names. But yeah, I didn't pay attention to that. I think I may be an honorary member because I don't think I was going to Chicago and doing these meetings.
Did you receive this presentation in May of 2014?
Seems like it. I mean, it has my email or I just saw my assistant's email here.
Right.
And it has my email, actually.
That's
my
your email address.
Do you recall reviewing it on or about March 14, 2014?
I don't. If they had asked me to look at something over the phone, I may have looked at it, but otherwise, it may have been that because, as you just pointed out, I was in the steering committee, that they sent it to me as an FYI, or maybe I participated over the phone. I don't remember, but I didn't pay attention.
If you look at the page ending 48215, there's a section on venous draws.
Yes.
It says, originally estimated that by the end of February 2014 would be below 20% of draws and below 10% by end of August.
Yes.
Who is providing projections of or estimates of venous draw percentages to Walgreens?
Yeah. So first of all, if you notice, I think this is still 2014. So we are early, and end of February, I think we were in 3 or 4 stores. So if they were given any estimates on projections of what we were targeting, I don't think these are projections. This is what we were targeting, because we were also learning and modifying a lot of things in our stores. So it probably would have come from me. At this level, I don't think anybody else would have given them these projections, so chances are they came from me.
And do you see that it says current projections below 20% by the end of August, 90% confidence level, below 10% by end of October, 95% confidence
Yes,
level?
I do see that.
Again, who from Theranos would be providing those confidence levels?
Well, I don't know the confidence level, but the projections around what our targets are for certain timelines probably came from me in conversations with Walgreens around what we were planning on doing in those stores. But I would not, because a lot of what we were doing depended on Walgreens also, because they were the ones who were executing. They were the ones who were providing us the technicians who can do the finger stick. Many times they didn't have enough people to do finger sticks, so we had to jump in and perform the testing. So this probably was a collaborative effort between me and Walgreens, but primarily I would have been the person providing this.
I guess in March of 2000, of May of 2014, did you? 2014. Did you have a high degree of confidence that Theranos would have less than 10% of its test menu at Walgreens on venipuncture by the end of October?
I mean, if I said this, then I must have had the confidence. The reason was, if you look at how we started performing our services at Walgreens, our contract called for Walgreens techs performing the services. So only finger stick, and of course urine, but that's, like you said, that's easy. Walgreens techs were going to do finger stick. We had put our phlebotomists in those stores to train them and make sure they perform services correctly. And then a plan was by May or June, our phlebotomists will leave the store, and they will go on train the next batch of Walgreens technicians. And at that point, only Walgreens techs would be doing the finger stick. And they could only perform tests that were done by finger stick. Now, as we launched, we started to listen to the market and learn about if that's the right strategy. One of the things that we learned was, like I think I mentioned earlier, that physicians wanted us to provide a broader menu, including venipuncture. Physicians generally didn't care about finger stick or venipuncture. And since we had the phlebotomists in the store anyway, and since Walgreens technicians were not quite trained yet, we added more tests and we started doing venipuncture. So one of the discussion points we were having with Walgreens was, hey, look, there's a value add to having a broader menu which includes venipunctures, because physicians like it, patients certainly like it because of the pricing and they save a lot of money. So we decided that around May, June, or as we move our technicians out from the stores, we would put them in the Walgreens 24-hour stores. So Walgreens retail pharmacies have 2 types of stores. One is just a typical Walgreens store, but then they have a 24-hour pharmacy which is open 24 hours. And they are, in almost every city they have those 24-hour pharmacies. And they also, because they're 24-hour pharmacies, they're bigger, they have more space, they actually have also dedicated room. So it was easier for us to actually put our phlebotomist there full-time. Maybe also with also a Walgreens technician. The reason was, now when a patient comes to our store, if we cannot do that lab order from finger stick, we can redirect them to a 24-hour store so we can do venipuncture on them. So some Walgreens stores would have the 24-hour stores will have a phlebotomist provided by Theranos doing venipuncture, and all other stores were going to do finger stick. Make sense? Actually, you don't have to answer it, but that's the. But the point was, as we moved towards that model, as it was anticipated in the contract, and obviously we would have modified the contract to reflect that either Theranos phlebotomists or even at some point Walgreens wanted to hire phlebotomists for 24-hour stores. By default, the most of the tests that were being performed would have been finger stick in the non-24-hour stores, and only these 24-hour stores would do venipuncture, and that would have given us these finger stick percentages. So long answer, but that's the kind of background.
So just if I could summarize that answer, what you're saying is your thought was these below 10% would be specific to those
24-hour stores.
24-hour stores.
Correct. it was not just a thought, it was a very serious, detailed discussion with Walgreens that was an excellent plan. Because the choice was either you do that, or you have a narrower menu, which is fingerstick only, and then you lose some customers. But that was a thought that Walgreens liked for a different reason, because they thought if all you do is fingerstick, then Walgreens technicians across the country can do this. It can scale faster because it's easier to do fingerstick. And they had done something similar with shots, like flu shots and other shots. So they thought it was an easier model to scale across the nation.
If you look at the bottom of the slide, it says, why high number of venous draws so far? And there's 2 bullet points provided. Learning process around ordering patterns, and ordering patterns were different than anticipated, and Theranos is adding new cartridges rapidly to address these patterns. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
In other words, Theranos' validation of assays on fingerstick technology was sort of not identified here as a reason, right?
Yeah, because that was not the limiting factor here.
Why were these the only limiting factor?
Because by May, like I said earlier, we had learned from the market that what people cared about was price transparency, low prices, convenience, quick turnaround time. And those attributes were actually gaining more traction than fingerstick. A lot of patients actually didn't care about fingerstick. That's the learning, the ordering patterns. This is what we were learning. The reason I'm sorry to interrupt, but I guess this looks like this is specifically related to the reason for the high number of venous draws. Yes, but go ahead.
So can you explain, I guess, why these are the 2 reasons for the percentage of venous draws?
Yeah. So unfortunately, it has a little bit more detailed answer. Even if a doctor orders a whole bunch of tests that can be done from fingerstick easily, if you order more than a certain threshold, they trigger a venipuncture. Right? Make sense? Sorry. It does. And what happens is, as we learn more and more, we wanted to go, one option was for us to go and optimize our assays to reduce the volume requirements for the assays which are causing the threshold triggers. And this is what it means by, even on the general chemistry or the most routinely ordered test, the reason why we still trigger a venipuncture is because people just order more tests. And what we had anticipated that some tests will not be ordered with others was being proven wrong. Also, primarily I think because we had a broader menu available. So the combination of those 2 meant doctors are ordering more tests, in some cases which just directly triggered venipuncture. And in many cases, doctors are ordering tests that we could have done from fingerstick, but they were triggering venipuncture because there were more of them. And actually, if I may take just 1 minute and explain one more thing, if that's okay?
Sure.
This is one thing that has been difficult to understand for most people, because they think you have fingerstick, you have venipuncture, what percentage you do fingerstick, what percentage you do venipuncture. And the simplest way I used to explain to people was using this example. And if that's okay, I would like to share that with you.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Let's assume a doctor sends you 10 patients. And those 10 patients have identical 10 tests, right? 9 of those tests we can do from fingerstick, 1 we cannot. It requires venipuncture, okay? When these 10 patients came, and assume the doctor has told us, fulfill the whole order, don't remove anything. Now, 9 out of those 10 tests we could have done from fingerstick, but because of that 1 test, it triggers venipuncture. Let's say there's another group of 10 patients. They also have 10 tests, different doctor, different patients. They have 10 tests. All of those we can do from fingerstick. But if you put all 10 of them together, it becomes too much blood from fingersticks. It triggers a venipuncture, right? So in those cases, assuming again the doctor says, do all of them, or I'm going to send them somewhere else, it triggers a venipuncture. The third one is, in our software, we used to keep track of people who were good bleeders and who were not. And good bleeders is people who can bleed easily from fingers. Even when you give them water, some people just had really tiny fingers. People have different fingers. They just didn't bleed very well. So we would capture that information in our software, so that next time when the patient came, we just won't even try a fingerstick unless they ask for it. We will just default to venipuncture because the patient experience was being negative. So let's assume 10 of those people showed up also, and software prompted all 10 of them should be venipuncture. Now let's assume there's another fourth group, and this is the last group, that had 10 patients. We could do all 10 of them from fingerstick, but the doctor has said, the example I gave you earlier, that fingerstick is new, I love you for everything else, but not fingerstick yet. Let's assume this is that doctor. Now again, we could have done all those 10 tests from fingerstick, but doctor has instructed us to do venipuncture, and the software will automatically default venipuncture. So in this case, we had 40 patients, 400 tests, only 10 of those we couldn't do from venipuncture, 390, 97.5% we can do from fingerstick. That's just one example of ordering patterns, how it impacted our fingerstick versus venipuncture decisions. So even though, technically speaking, if you ask me what percentage of tests you can do from fingerstick, in that example, let's assume that's the whole world, I would have said 97.5%. But if you stood outside the door of the Walgreens store and talked to those 40 patients, every one of them got a venipuncture.
I guess at this point in time, so I understand that you felt that venipuncture versus fingerstick was maybe not the most relevant measure of success given the feedback you're getting from doctors.
Right.
Did Walgreens continue to track fingerstick versus venipuncture as a metric to evaluate its theranos offering?
Yes, they did.
I guess was that a point of frustration to you then, given this other information that you had?
Not necessarily. In 2014, first of all, Walgreens had raw data around fingerstick percentages. They always knew anytime a patient came in, when you check them in, the person doing the check-in is the Walgreens technician. So they of course know how many percentages they're getting, fingersticks that they're getting, so they already know. In 2014, I was still working with them because our contract and business model was what I explained to you earlier, which is non-24-hour stores, Walgreens technician doing fingersticks, and then 24-hour stores, venipuncture and fingersticks, both. So no, 2014 all the way through September-ish, August, not a point of frustration. But around that time, around that time frame, we started discussing the model shift, that it may make more sense for us to take over more and more of performing the service, put our phlebotomist, and we started shifting. Now, even after...
Sorry, and just, can you clarify what time frame you're talking about there that
yes,
started shifting?
I think it was around August, September. We had it early. September is early conversations.
Of 2014?
Yes, 2014, sorry. Yes, good point. And then October 2014, the conversations got deeper, and there were changes, monumental changes happening at Walgreens. The management was changing, and I can get into that if you want. And but the fingersticks were still important to them and us because it was a differentiating factor. But that's what it was. And then 2015, after 2015 January, the equation shifted because then they effectively became the landlord and we became the tenants. And then there was a different world for us.
Okay. I want to turn to another slide in this deck. It's ending at page 48220. And you see this diagnostic testing timeline. Are you able to read that at all, or
I can try.
I can mark as another exhibit a blown up version of this slide.
You have a bigger one?
Yeah, I'll mark
cool.
I'll mark it as 244.
Thank you.
Do you recognize reviewing timelines like these from Walgreens?
No, I don't recall. Not often. I don't. If they send me this one, this is probably the only time, or a couple of times more, but not often.
It looks like in there's a sign for today. It says pilot 10 stores in Arizona, May 14. And then it looks like still got pilot stores, 11 stores by August 21. And then it looks like Q1 15 and Q2 15. It's market selection and store selection. And then it looks like Q4 2015 500 stores. You see that?
Where's the 500 stores?
Under
Oh, yeah.
Scale 500 stores.
Yes, I see that.
And then there's another market selection, store selection, and scale to 1,000 stores by Q4 fiscal year 14.
Yes, I see that.
I mean, was it your understanding in May 2014 that Walgreens only planned to open 500 stores by the end of fiscal 2015?
No, that was not.
What was your understanding about the number of stores Walgreens is planning on?
we had we had different meetings and we had different numbers. I recall, and these are fiscal years, as you pointed out. So we're talking about Q2 fiscal year 2015 would be around January of 2015. Or actually even sooner, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, so winter of 2015. We had another meeting, I think in summer. I don't know when this slide is from. What's the date for this?
It looks like to me
In May?
from the May slide.
Yeah, I think we had another meeting that I had participated in July or August with Walgreens that had 2,000 stores that we had discussed and committed that we were going to push hard to roll out to by fiscal 2016. So these numbers changed. The other thing also is, as I learned, the Walgreens, this is for internal audience, this is not for us, and Walgreens guys were very cautious not to overcommit themselves to the CEO and executive committee on what they're going to do. They wanted to under-promise and over-deliver. So that was their mindset also.
I guess what gave you the impression that they wanted to under-promise to their executive committee? And
they used to tell me all the time.
Who at Walgreens?
This would come up constantly, like don't over, when you're in front of the executives, because I'm an entrepreneur, I get excited about technology, so I used to talk to them and I used to say, yeah, we have these possibilities of doing these cool things, and they would say, no, don't mention those things in front of our executives, because then they will push us to move faster. So this was a constant, like not once or twice, constant at Walgreens, always under promise to the executives.
You can put that aside, and you can put.
I have a couple questions actually. So, in your earlier testimony, I think you mentioned that one of the metrics that Walgreens was focused on was patients per store per day.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
What was your understanding as to what Walgreens wanted to see that number get to be?
Well, that's a good question. I think, again, what they had promised their executives is what I had heard from them was 10 to 15 patient number is what they talked about. But between us, when we used to talk about is, blowing past that number, So we knew from our first-hand experience observing traffic at Quest Diagnostics and LabCorp that those guys get on average 80, 100 plus, sometimes 200, 250 patients per day. So we knew that the potential was very significant in terms of the upside. But that was my conversation with them.
Okay, and who did you discuss the goal of getting to 10 to 15 patients per store per day with?
That was not my goal. I didn't discuss with them. They shared with me that this is what they're telling the senior executives is their goal. Okay. I didn't see their model. They didn't share that with me.
And who shared that with you?
There was a guy. He was an accountant. His name was. It was a common theme. I used to spend a lot of time with these guys. Like I said, we really were close like family. So they used to say, we are telling everybody 10, 15. When you get in front of the executives, do not mention a number higher than that, because we would under-promise, over-deliver.
Okay. And what was your understanding in the 2014 timeframe as to the number of patients per store per day that you were seeing?
In what time frame?
In 2014.
Which time frame?
Well, did it change? What
I don't recall, but...
Do you have an understanding as to what it was in 2014?
I think it depended on the stores. There were some stores where we were seeing 10, 15, 20. In some stores, we were seeing 5 or even less per day on average. We learned later, unfortunately, too late for us, that a lot of these stores that were assigned Theranos were what Walgreens used to call underperforming stores. These are the stores that were not performing from them as pharmacy and other products they sell in Walgreens. So they used to measure the metrics, and they put us on those stores, thinking somehow we will sprinkle magic dust and make them high-performing stores. So what happened was, when a certain store doesn't get enough Medicare patients, we also don't get it by default. So, but it was later. But that's the.
Who told you that you were being placed in underperforming stores?
We got a spreadsheet from Walgreens that had data on every single store Walgreens owned across the country, entire country. Sales broken down by front end, pharmacy, growth revenue numbers, ranking in a given geography, I had the entire spreadsheet for that, literally all 88,800 stores. Ton of data.
When did you receive that?
I don't remember the date. I think it was maybe 2014-ish, mid 2014 probably.
Who did you receive it from?
I personally didn't receive it. The person who received it was, and then he forwarded it to me, because it was we were actually it was a follow-on, I think, to the comment that I made earlier that July or August timeframe we were talking about, 2,000 stores, and we started thinking about where we want to be, what geographies. And in that meeting, I had told Walgreens, look, guys, you really need the next 200 stores you give us, you gotta give us good stores so we can go and succeed and show that this is a great idea, because you have given us the toughest market in the nation, Arizona, and the worst stores in the nation in your geography. And you need to step up and give us good stores and good geography, good state like New York, California, so we can hit home runs.
Okay. And did you understand when you had these discussions with the Walgreens executives that 10 to 15 patients per store per day was the goal, and that there would be trouble convincing higher management to roll out Theranos services in Walgreens stores if you weren't able to meet that goal?
No, that's completely not my understanding, and that would be also wrong. Because, as you saw in the contract, Walgreens made a $100 million commitment to us for a national rollout. And if we went to them and saying, look, we want to launch in Illinois, and they said, no, we are not committed, then we would have launched with CVS. The amendment shows that very clearly. So, you have a question? Seems like you're...
I don't think anyone wants to interrupt your answer,
okay.
So keep going.
Yeah, so... no, so it was very clear to us that if they said no, great, we are going to work with CVS or somebody else, is the first answer. The second thing is, it is just simple math. If you look at $100 million and how they were going to make any profit, let alone break even, it meant a very large number of stores with a large number of patients coming in. So these guys were all in. And I told us at the dinner that I talked about in Arizona that this company is all in. We're going to make this successful.
So you're saying because Walgreens had already paid Theranos $100 million, and as we talked about earlier, that was not returnable to Walgreens. They'd already made that commitment. So it wouldn't have made sense that Walgreens would want to slow down expansion of the stores because they wouldn't be able to make that $100 million back.
Well, that's one reason. What I'm saying is just simple logic and math that tells you that's the case. However, there's also the contract where they're saying they are a national partner. And the enormous number of conversations that we had, they said, we are all in, we want to roll this nationally. There were constant dialogue, so it's all over the place. The reason I was talking about $100 million is Walgreens had done a fair market value analysis on the services Walgreens was providing as part of Theranos services under this contract, which means they had a technician who was going to do the finger stick, somebody had to check in the patient, the IT guys had to install the terminal, all of that stuff. They did a fair market value analysis, and they told me it was $9.65 was their cost of services. That meant only 35 cents, and they were getting $10 from us as part of the service. 35 cents was their profit. So in order to even break even on the $100 million innovation payment, you can do the simple math, but my math is we had to be not only in 1,600 stores, but many stores, and 10 patients at 1,600 stores will take them years to even break even, and assuming they're not making any interest on that investment. So I can do the simple math for you if you want, but it would be, they needed a large volume to be able to recover that investment.
But why continue rolling out with new stores if Walgreens wasn't breaking even, as you say, and wasn't making money because the patient traffic in stores wasn't meeting the 10 to 15 patients?
You're talking about in Arizona or in general?
In general.
As a conceptual?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's highly likely that if, for instance, we didn't succeed, and let's say we went to California and New York, right? We opened 100 stores or whatever, right? Let's assume we only went to California, and Walgreens we are not being successful. Then we go to them saying, go to the next state. They may say, no, we don't want to. Fine, we would go work with somebody else. With CVS, at that point, Walgreens may not grow with us. I don't think there was a commitment from them that we are guaranteeing you 2,000 stores.
What was the patients per day number that mattered from Theranos' perspective? I mean, it wouldn't make sense from Theranos' perspective to offer services, at 1,000 stores if you're only seeing 2 patients per day. Right?
Yeah. I mean, we had modeled that in the financial model to see what the break-even would be, and there were a lot of different assumptions. It's how much money we are spending on the stores. Was it in the current model or the new model, because the economics were changing between us and Walgreens? So there were a lot of factors that. That's the whole purpose of the model, that you can just modulate someone and the other, and you see where the break-even happens, at what volume per store, per day, per patient. Also, the requisitions. I mean, the revenue per requisition or per patient, right? And revenue.
And sorry, I've just seen that term a couple places. Did you always understand revenue per requisition to mean revenue per patient?
No, requisition is different from patient.
Can you explain the difference?
Yes, a patient can bring 2 requisitions. Let's say a doctor gave you a rec, and you didn't go to the lab because you didn't want to, and then some other doctor said, get this test done. Now you have 2 requisitions, right? And you bring them to Walgreens store, those are 2 requisitions. They may have different tests, they may have similar tests, but they're 2 requisitions, even though 1 patient.
I guess, was it common for a patient to bring in requisitions from multiple doctors?
I don't know if it was common, but it did happen. I don't know how common, I didn't track that, but yes, it absolutely happened.
How would that be tracked in the patients per day metrics that you were tracking with Walgreens? Would they be tracked as 1 patient or 2?
It'll be tracked as 1 patient. That information didn't split that into requisitions, so we were providing patients per day, not requisitions.
And in that situation, would you pay Walgreens just one $10 fee?
Yes, correct.
Just looking back at this Exhibit 173, sorry to make you have to grab that back, but if you just turn to the page with dates ending 214,
yes.
You'll see there's average patients per store per day. As of February 7th, 2014, it's 0.8.
Yes.
Do you see that? And then
Yes.
as of May 1st, 2014, it's 3.1.
Yes.
Was that consistent with your understanding in May of 2014 as to the average patients per store per day that you were seeing in stores during these dates?
If they are here, then chances are they're right, because Walgreens had full visibility into this data, because obviously they were checking people in, so I would guess that they're right.
Okay, and then with respect to the venous draw percentages for February 7th, 2014, it was 43%, and then May 1st, 2014, it's 39%. Was that also consistent with your understanding of the percentage of venous draws that were being performed at that time?
Yeah, venous draws. This is not finger sticks, yeah, so that seemed reasonably consistent, yeah.
Okay. Did either of these numbers change significantly in 2014?
I think they've used to fluctuate over time. They did change, yes.
Okay. Did the percentage of venous draws ever go above 50%?
I don't remember top of my head, but at some point they did, yes.
When?
I don't remember top of my head, but
Okay. And how do you know that?
because just I have a vague memory that our finger sticks and venipuncture fluctuated, and 50%. They may, at some point they dropped, so I know for sure they went down. I just don't remember when. Actually, you asked me in 2014. The answer to that is I'm not sure about 2014, but I have a memory that they did go down below 50%.
That venous draws went below.
Sorry, venous draws went up.
Venous draws went.
Above 50%.
Or do you mean fingers?
No, this one has venous draws here. So it says 43%. That's actually, when you asked me the question, this is why I did a double take here. The venous draw percentage went up above 50%. That means finger sticks went down below 50%.
Do you remember?
Why?
5-0.
What do you? And you said that you don't think that happened in 2014, or?
No. I'm saying I don't remember if it happened in 2014 or not. I know it happened during this time. I just don't know when it happened.
Okay. And do you know if the average patients per store per day ever changed in 2014 significantly? Did it go up?
I wouldn't be able to recall that, because as we got to 40 stores, because the 10 or 20 stores were new, so I don't remember what was the patient volume initially in new stores, but I don't know if it changed or not.
I'm going to hand you a document on mark is Exhibit 245. And just for the record, Exhibit 245 is a multi-page document, bait stamp TS 1052342. It's a long document. I don't need you to review the whole thing, but generally, do you recognize what Exhibit 245 is?
Yes, seems like an email. from me and Elizabeth and a bunch of other people.
And do you recall reviewing this email on or around May 14, 2014?
I don't recall exactly, but it has my name on it, so I probably looked at it.
If you just look on the first page of 245, the email from, it's sent to WAG Daily Report.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What is WAG Daily Report?
In Microsoft Exchange, you can create aliases and put a whole bunch of people under that alias. It's like Twitter. And then when you send an email to that alias, it goes to everybody who's on that little distribution list. It's called a distribution list, actually.
Do you know who was on this distribution list?
It changed over time. I mean, I don't recall exactly, but it seems like I certainly was.
Does it also look like from the response that Ms. Holmes was? Looks like she's responding asking for some additional information to be put on these reports. Do you see that?
Yeah, so she either was on it or somehow she got the email and she responded to it.
Did Ms. Holmes keep track of this Venus versus finger stick percentage that customers were experiencing at Walgreens?
No.
How do you know?
We didn't have many conversations about it. We had few, and anytime she needed the number or details, she would always reach out to me saying, "Can you give me an update what's going on?" And I would give her an update and I would explain to her what in detail was going on, but it was not a frequent occurrence, which led me to believe she's not tracking it.
Okay.
Was Ms. Holmes ever, was she ever aware that Walgreens thought it was important to reduce the Venus draw percentage
At what time?
in 2014?
I don't know if I communicated that to her or not. I mean, she knew in general that before summer of, like I mentioned earlier, that our model was that we will, scale with Walgreens only around finger stick tests. So in that regard, at that point, it was important. But I was honestly not briefing her on the operational details or even my Walgreens conversations, because that would just double the time that I had to spend on the same project. So I was not doing that often.
Okay. And do you know if she was aware of the fact that Walgreens thought that patients per store per day, that metric was important to them?
It was important to everybody in general because that was our business. But again, specifically if Walgreens had asked me it was important or not, I don't know. And the reason for that is a lot of the reasons why we were not seeing the patients per day was because of Walgreens execution. So they couldn't complain to us too much about patients per day because they were the roadblock on many of those reasons why we were low patient count.
So are you saying that she wouldn't have been aware that that was important to Walgreens?
She may have been aware it was important to Walgreens, but then she was also aware because I told her that these are the reasons why we are slow, and those reasons were Walgreens. So it is possible, and the reason why we didn't talk too much about this topic was she assumed that at some point Walgreens is going to get their act together and fix these issues so we can scale. But that would be my guess. I didn't talk to her about that.
Okay. You can put that document aside. In 2014, were you generally familiar with something called the Walgreens Well Experience?
I recall the name, yes.
What was your understanding of Walgreens Well Experience in 2014?
Walgreens had started this project where they were going to try to make Walgreens stores better and look better for patients' experience. And so they were doing construction in a lot of stores. And so, for example, had a vision of turning Walgreens into a healthcare company away from their current business, which is alcohol, tobacco, and candies and sugar and this and that. And he really wanted Walgreens to be just like Starbucks is the third location between home and office, as they say. He wanted Walgreens to be the third location between your doctor and your home, so people could come there. So he was building this well-experienced format stores where they can provide more healthcare services. And as part of that would have been a space dedicated to Theranos as we scaled. The gold and silver locations was part of that.
And was it your understanding that Theranos would be part of all well-experienced stores, or just that in the process of building out the well-experienced stores, some would be selected for Theranos wellness centers?
It won't, my understanding at that time was it wasn't necessarily all, because we didn't have to be in all stores in a geography to begin with. I mean, they had 8,000 stores. We don't think we had to be in 8,000 stores. I mean, if you go to New York, Times Square, they had like 7 Walgreens domain reads. If you're in just one, you can see the others, right? So we didn't have to be in all 7 domain reads. So I would say not all 2,000, but in general, those stores were picked to be well-experienced stores for a reason, because they were either more profitable, they had a better clientele. So the assumption was those reasons are good enough reasons for whatever other services Walgreens intended to offer. They were thinking about growing their clinic business, the healthcare clinic. Walgreens had I don't know if you know, Walgreens had a urgent care clinic business. They had about 400, 500 locations, and CVS now has about 1,500. So CVS ran with that business, and Walgreens, I think, slowly shut it down because they didn't succeed. But those stores were meant for healthcare services, and my expectation and understanding was from many conversations with Walgreens that those are the gold and silver, quote unquote, locations.
I'm going to hand you a document that's previously been marked as Exhibit 176. And again, without reviewing the whole thing, do you generally recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is a meeting minutes from a meeting that we had with Walgreens. I cannot tell where we had it, but it seems like a meeting minutes.
And what were these partnership meetings?
Where?
What were they?
They changed over time depending on the participants. I would attend when I could. When I did, then the subject would be more strategic also, not just operational details. But there were many that I didn't attend, and then in that case, they'll be mostly operational in nature.
And did you receive this document on or around August 11th, 2014?
Yeah, it seems like it is. My name is on the email, I think. Yes, it is there.
And was it your general practice to review these minutes after these meetings?
No.
Did anyone at Theranos take a look at these after the meetings?
I never asked anybody, but I wouldn't be surprised if who basically ran these meetings for me when I was in Arizona would review them to make sure they're accurate and include some of our grievances.
If you take a look at the last page of the document, date stamp ending in 54644. Looks like, and this is all under the heading, sorry, if you look at the page before, it's all under the heading Plan for Fiscal Year 15.
Yes, right.
And there's a bullet point that says, initial goal for fiscal year 15, SEP-OG, was 500 stores. Need to redefine this goal.
Correct.
And then there's sort of a chart down below where it shows well-experienced stores in 2015 and Theranos stores in 2015.
Actually, sorry for interrupting you. The next line is also important here. It says initial goal for fiscal 15 was 500, and I think that's the slide that you showed me earlier. And this is probably the memory that I have. She says need to redefine this goal. Nationwide, 2,000 to 2,500 stores is her comment. So that was my understanding from the meeting.
And what is 25 to 35 MSAs?
Metropolitan service areas.
So you read this meeting, your recollection from this meeting in August 2014 was that Walgreens wanted to define up its targets for expansion in fiscal year 2015? Yeah,
actually, another key reason for that was around the same time frame had visited us. I think July or August time frame, I may have mentioned it earlier. And he actually wanted to see if he can be in 4,000 stores.
In 2015?
Yes. And because they said, we have experience rolling services out, they used to talk very proudly about their vaccination services, about how they train people, and within, I don't know how many, in a year or so, they rolled this thing out nationwide. So they thought they could do it. They had enough training skills, and if we committed to that, we can do it. And I said, no, I don't think we'll be ready for that, because there's a lot of work we have to do. And we were also familiar with the performance of Walgreens technicians, which was not ideal. So we didn't want to pursue with that.
So as of August 2014, or mid-August 2014, what was your view of the number of stores you felt comfortable with projecting for the next year?
I wouldn't remember, but it would be in one of the models that I have. So if I probably had a model that was time-stamped around September, August timeframe, and I probably would have included the number there.
Did you say?
Yeah. And he had visited us so they had visited us to have that conversation.
And it's your memory that they communicated at the time that they wanted to expand beyond 2,000 stores?
Yes. He actually, I think, may even had used a bigger number than 4,000, but it was too big for my brain, so I remember 4,000. But yes, he mentioned, can we roll it out nationally, like 4,000 stores, and be in every 24-hour stores. They have 1,600 24-hour pharmacies. So he said, that's easy, we can do that, because we already have staff.
And when was that meeting?
I think it was the same time frame, around July, August. I may be off by a month or so, but or summer of 2014, but this time frame.
And when did you leave the company?
I believe October of 2014.
And so you were, in terms of your main contact at Walgreens, was it still during this time frame?
Well, he was not our main contact. I mean, like I mentioned, there were a bunch of other people. He was a busy guy, so he couldn't serve as a main contact. He was one of the main contacts, but during had direct access to, so he was a contact. But there were other people we could talk to, and obviously we could have reached out to him if he wanted, but I wouldn't say he was the main contact.
Around the time that you heard this desire to expand, and your memory thinks that this partnership meeting involved expanding to a higher goal for Theranos rollout, did they ever express concerns to you about expansion beyond Arizona?
No. This was a champion of rolling it out as fast, and he used to say, if you think 40 is difficult, wait until we are in, I don't know, 5,000 or 4,000 or a big number, like nationwide. So no, they, Walgreens prided themselves being execution machine. We just needed to get our stuff ready. Walgreens can roll it out overnight. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but they had very high confidence.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, and so if you're looking back at, the page with Bates number ending 54644, there's this table that's under that bullet point that we were just talking about.
Right.
And it's got 2015, 2016, 2017, and it's got well experience, and it's 2,000 for 2015, 2,000 for 2016, and 1,500 for 2017.
Right.
And then it's got Theranos underneath.
Yes.
200 for 2015.
Right.
800 for 2016, and 800 for 2017. What was your understanding as to what this table was portraying?
Yeah. If you go back to the discussion we had about the gold and silver stores, the gold stores were marked as Theranos only spaces, dedicated Theranos with the attached bathroom. The silver spaces were the well-experienced stores. Some stores in some cases had attached bathroom. I would say most cases it didn't. But it was possible to build a bathroom. We needed a bathroom for lab services. Sorry, should have made that clear. So well experienced is what was, in my memory, constituted as silver stores. And I think they had sent me few emails which explained what a gold and silver would look like, and which will confirm this. But gold was a dedicated Theranos space like you see here.
So your understanding is that these numbers represent the number of gold level stores that Theranos would be rolling out in?
These will be Theranos only stores. Now, I don't know if they meant that these are rolling out or they're building out. I cannot tell. But the point I was making earlier was that when we met in this meeting, and I remember 2,000 number was, we talked about in this meeting that we need to roll out because this is an order from the executives that we need to roll out faster. Like I said, visited us, but talked about even bigger numbers. So I didn't read this document then, but looking at now, it's consistent with the conversation we had that when it says Theranos, those are gold spaces. Means Theranos only spaces, because well experience we were sharing with other services. Now they were not really performing other services, so it was kind of exclusive to us, but well experience was mostly a shared space. In some cases it was a small room, in some cases you can actually see some of the well experience stores, I think in San Francisco, where they have a sliding door, and you do all the patient checking and all the patients wait outside the door, and then one at a time you take the patient in and perform the service. And we actually had some well-experienced stores in Arizona that we were using already.
Mr. Balwani, we're almost out of time on the tape, and I promised a 6 o'clock end for the day, so I think those are all the questions we have for you today, and we appreciate your time today, and we look forward to resuming tomorrow. So thank you for your time. And we're off the record at 5:59 p.m.
Off the record, 5:59.